Perfect.
Okay.
So what was the world before DevOps? That is something we'll need to talk about. Second, we'll talk about waterfall model and agile methodology. Now, why exactly I'm talking about this methodology? That is something I'll talk about. Then what is DevOps? Very important question. And why Azure DevOps? That is a very, I think many of you guys will have that question. Why Azure DevOps? Why not other two? Okay. Followed by, we'll see some important DevOps key components. I will not be able to cover all the key components today, guys. But yeah, definitely I'll cover some of the key components. And at the end, we'll have a demo wherein I have a .NET application end-to-end build and release. So we'll be building the application, and at the same time, we'll be deploying this application on Azure cloud. That is something, the agenda for today. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A at the end. Then whatever doubt queries you guys have it, we'll have a discussion on that. Okay. Now, before I start and just start talking about DevOps, let's talk about who exactly I am. So guys, myself, Rohit Kumar Singh, I'll be the instructor for you guys. I have 12 plus years experience in IT industry. I have worked with various multinational. I have worked with startups. So to name few, I have worked with JP Morgan, HP, Bark India, and I'm currently working as a DevOps lead in one of the MNC. I have trained many students offline, online. I have trained students globally, US, Canada, India. Okay, I've trained students on YouTube channel on various platforms. About my certification, I am a DevOps master. I have done multiple certification. It was not feasible for me to have all those certification in the slide. So I have multiple certification. If you want to check my credibility, you can go and check it on my LinkedIn. Everything is updated on my LinkedIn page. Okay, that was all about me. Now let's get started. Let's see what exactly we were doing before DevOps. There are few prerequisites for this demo, for this webinar. We'll need Azure DevOps account. We'll need Azure portal, that's cloud sign-in on Azure cloud, and we need to install Git Bash. Now this is why we need, because I'll be at the end, I'll be doing a demo on Azure DevOps. I'll be setting up CI/CD pipelines, and the deployment will happen on Azure portal. And Git Bash is basically, I'll be pushing my code. I already have a .NET application created. So I'll be pushing my code into a remote repo. For that, I'll be using Git Bash. Okay. Now you guys can go and opt for free tier. I have the documentation how to sign in for the very first time. I'll not sign in today, guys, because that will take the whole time. So I have a documentation created with each and every step, how to sign in on Azure DevOps, how to sign in on Azure portal, how to create a free tier subscription. All this will be shared with you guys. Okay. Okay, let's move on. That is a bit of prerequisite about this demo, what we are doing today. Now, what was the world before DevOps? Now, this DevOps came in picture somewhere around year 2007 and 2008. After that, this DevOps culture, the process came in picture, and everyone started talking about DevOps. Nowadays, each and every company, wherever you go, they need some sort of DevOps engineer, because DevOps engineer are the person who is bridging the gap between development and IT operation. I'll talk about DevOps later, but for now, what exactly, how the software was getting developed before DevOps. So we might have heard about waterfall model. Hopefully my complete screen is visible, guys. Waterfall model. So this is something was the process all software development people were using. Mostly they were using this waterfall model. Why they were using this waterfall model? The reason is very simple. The waterfall model is it's very straightforward, and it's a linear model. It follows the top-down approach. So this is basically, I'm just giving an FYI, guys. This is something was getting used prior. Now with waterfall model, it was a very simple and easy to understand and use this model. Each phases, basically, if you go and see, check, each phases were dependent on the previous phase. Now, like suppose if the requirement is going on, people will do the requirement part. All the complete team is involved in taking care of requirement. Same goes with design, implementation, testing, deployment, maintenance. So each phase, like the design phase was dependent on the requirement phase. The implementation phase was dependent on design phase, same way. So this is why I call it as straightforward and a linear model. It was very easy to use, easy to manage due to the rigidity of the model. Now, what is rigidity? Rigidity is basically they were not accepting any change midway. Like if there is a change in requirement, it was very difficult to accommodate those changes in waterfall model. There were no parallel deployment. So in waterfall model, there was no parallel deployment. Nowadays in microservice world, we do parallel deployments, correct? Parallel deployment, parallel developments. So there was nothing as such. So that's why this model was very simple, easy to understand, and the targets were very clearly defined that this is something we need to create at the end of the day. That is how this waterfall model used to work. Now, it was very good. This model was very good if you have a simple and a small project. Waterfall model was not at all a best fit if you have some complex or some multi-tier project, then definitely you cannot use waterfall model, because it is very difficult. Like if I am your client, if I am giving some requirement that I need to create an application, so at the initial stage you cannot expect that I will have all the clarity what needs to be created. That was not the case in waterfall model. In waterfall model, whatever you have given at the day one, the same thing will be delivered at the end of the day. Now suppose, take an example, if I want to create an elephant, but at the day one I'm not sure what kind of elephant I want. I have a vague idea that I need to have a tall, big animal like structure. It should have a trunk, 4 legs and things like that. So that vague idea I'm sharing with my development team. The client is sharing that with the project team. Now the project team is sharing with the development team. There's so many confusion, so many communication gap is happening. Now at the end, the expectation was that we need to create an elephant, and what exactly we are creating at the end, we are creating a giraffe kind of structure. That is what waterfall model summarize. So any complex project, any complex application cannot be created using waterfall model. Waterfall model was capable enough for smaller projects, okay, wherein you have a clear requirement, wherein there is no last minute drift. If you want to change something, there's no last minute drift, and every stage is clearly defined. In that case, you'll be using waterfall model. Okay. As I said, the disadvantage of waterfall model, there was no working copy, guys. No a beta version, no working copy till the time an actual application is completely developed. It has high risk of amount and uncertainty. You don't know what will happen at the end of the day. Plus, it was not accepting any midway change, any change in requirement. That was very difficult to accommodate in waterfall model. Now, there are few advantages and disadvantages over here. Simple and easy to understand, easy to manage, no working software, high amount of risk and uncertainty, not a good model for complex and object-oriented project. So these are some advantages and disadvantages which we had. I'm talking about 2 decades back, when in the year 2090s, 20s, at that time we had this model, and there were many projects which was based on such models. Okay. Now, because the various disadvantage and because there were no clear path what needs to be done, there was a second model which became very popular, that is known as Agile. Now, if you look closely, Agile, okay, Agile methodology, this is something we are using in DevOps today. That is the reason I'm taking you from the history. Now I'll take you to the today's what we are doing. So today we are using Agile, Scrum, Lean, Kanban. I'll not talk about all the methodology. That is something I'll keep it for later sessions. Today, why exactly we are talking about Agile? Because Agile is getting used today for all your complex application, project, whatever you're doing today. Now, if you look into this agile loop, this circle, this is very similar to what you were doing in waterfall model. This circle was very similar what you have just seen in the waterfall model: planning, design, testing, build, acceptation, deploy. This is exactly what we did in the waterfall model. The only difference what Agile bought, started doing things in iterations. Now, what is iterations? Iterations is nothing but number of weeks. Okay. Now in Agile, you have 2 weeks. That's the minimum iteration. Maximum is 8 weeks. Now, what we started doing in Agile, what we were not doing in waterfall model, we started breaking the application in small modules. Now think an example of elephant again. Now, if the client wants to build an elephant, now what we do, we take the requirement to build the trunk first. We build that trunk, we deploy that trunk, we test that trunk, we hand over that trunk to the client. Now client has a look and feel. Now client can look, okay, this is what my application will get built on. This is the structure, this is the trunk. Now this is looking good. And if client has some feedback to give you, immediately in the same iteration, client will get back to you with client feedback. Yeah, the trunk is looking good, the color could be different, it should have, the length should be different. So you're getting a positive feedback from the client. Now whatever feedback you got, you work on that feedback, you re-deliver the product to the client. Now client is very much satisfied. Now what exactly we are doing, we are following the same model of software development. The only thing is we started breaking the bigger application into small modules, and the critical modules we are developing first and giving it to the client, and at the same time we are receiving a positive feedback, and at the end of the day, what are we doing? We are delivering a quality product. Okay, so agile methodology is an iterative based software development approach where software projects is broken down into various iterations or sprints. So it's one of the same thing, guys, whether you call it as iterations. In Agile, we call it as iterations. Sprints, we call it in Scrum. Okay, I'll talk about Scrum later. For now, this is what Agile methodology is all about. Each iteration has phases like waterfall model, such as requirement gathering, design, development, testing, and maintenance. The duration of this each iteration is 2 to 8 weeks. And this particular methodology we are using today. Now, if you're working as a DevOps engineer, or if you're working as a software developer, or if you're working in a DevOps culture, the work item management is done by Agile methodology. If it's a larger or complex project, it is done by Agile methodology. If it's a small mid-scale project, then it is mainly they use Scrum methodology over there. Okay. Now, the only principles you need to remember for Agile and Scrum is the bigger software is broken down into multiple modules, and those multiple modules are loosely coupled with each other. That is what microservice world is today. Okay, we had monolithic, wherein all the application was tightly coupled with together. Now today we are in the microservice world, wherein we are developing each module separately. Like if you take an example of Amazon.com, it's a very big shopping website, correct? So just think of a module such as your product page, your payment gateway, your shopping cart module. You will, in the product page, you will have multiple pages like men's product page, women product page, child product page, electronics, mobile, so many things. So what you're doing, you're building those modules one at a time and loosely coupled. Those modules are loosely and they're able to interact with each other. And those modules are basically deployed on Kubernetes pod, container, wherever you want to deploy. I don't want to talk about the deployment part right now. This is how the modules are created and the modules are built using Agile or Scrum. There could be other methodology as well, but this is what we use today for all sort of software development. Okay, perfect. Let's move on. What is DevOps? This is the question I used to ask to all my students, and I have taken more than 500 interviews, guys. And this is the question which I asked. Definitely I ask this question. Now the what most of the time what answer I get, DevOps is where development and operation team coming together. Okay. And then people, they start talking about all the tools what we have in the DevOps, like Azure DevOps, Jenkins, Bamboo, GitHub Action, and those things. Now guys, let me understand, dev and operation team coming together, collaborating together, definitely that is one of the principle of DevOps, but that is not exactly DevOps. What exactly is DevOps? Let's understand that. DevOps is standing on two important pillars. The first pillar is people. When I say people, I'm talking about you and me. We are the people. We are the very critical aspect of DevOps. When you want to follow a DevOps process, DevOps methodology in a real world time, we are the people who takes care of that. The second pillar is the process. Process is basically the process what we define. Okay, if we want as a DevOps engineer that my development team and operation team should come together, collaborate together, whatever software is getting developed, it should be, each and every person should be aware what exactly the software is, what is the flow, what are the different modules, how the application is built, how the application is deployed. That process needs to be defined. Okay, that is two important pillars: people, process, people coming together, and the process which is well defined. Okay, then only your company, your team will follow DevOps. Last but not the least, tools. Okay, now imagine guys, you have the people, you have the right people, you have the process defined, but you're still following the manual process, creating the script, attaching the script to an email and sending it to the developer to deploy. Will that make sense? Are you following DevOps in a real manner? So this third part, the third pillar, this is a critical aspect in DevOps world. Now people, process, and the tool, these are the three things all together. These three important people all together, they form DevOps for you. They form the right DevOps culture. So DevOps is not a tool, guys. Just keep that in mind. It's not a tool. DevOps is a cultural, a mindset change that no, we need to work together, and we need to, at the end of the day, we need to have a quality product created for the client. Then only we'll get the business, correct? Now, all this needs to be well supported by business owners. Now, suppose if you're working in a company, now you and your colleagues decided, let's start working on a DevOps. Start working on DevOps tools. Will that be feasible? Are you making justice to DevOps principles methodology? No. This needs to be well supported by your business owners. When I say business owner, I'm talking about your CTOs, your VPs, your AVPs. They need to support this. They need to come upfront. They need to spend. They need to make sure that there's a DevOps culture, because now if you go nowadays, each and every company is following this. But if you go 5 years back, the developers were very laid down. They were like, I am the boss, whatever I am doing, and the operation team has nothing to do. At the end of the day, they are just getting a Word document with all the steps. Look, this is your application, this is how it is deployed, this is how it is restarted. If failed, this is what you need to do. That a Word document is given to them. They're not even aware what exactly is this. Now what happens, even for a small failure in the application, they need to reach out to the development team. The development team needs to spare time, come back, debug, fix it. Now in this, all this haywire what we are doing, we're wasting so much of time. Now that is the bridge what DevOps engineer, DevOps culture will come and fix it for you. Okay, so whenever now people will ask what is DevOps, don't just talk about the tools. DevOps is all about people, process, and it should be well supported by the right tool. DevOps is a cultural and a mindset change. Keep that in mind. Okay. Now let's go and see the definition. As I said, DevOps is nothing but it's a cultural where collaboration between development, operation, and business team is considered as critical aspect of DevOps journey. It is not solely about the tools. DevOps is an organization that's create continuous value. Tools are only one of the pillar, the other being people and process. Keep this in mind, guys. Okay. What are the benefits of using DevOps? Low failure rate. You're getting continuous feedback. You're reworking on it. Then definitely it's a low failure rate. Increase in deployment frequency. Quicker mean time to recovery. Shorten lead time between fixes. So these are some of the benefits. It's not all benefits which I'm talking about. These are some of the benefits which we're talking about right now when we talk about DevOps. Now, why Azure DevOps? Now, many of you will have that question. Why Azure DevOps? Why Azure DevOps? Why not other tools? Why everyone nowadays from last 3-4 years, everyone started talking about Azure DevOps? Why? That why I will answer today. Azure DevOps, consider the Azure DevOps as a big umbrella. Azure DevOps is a big umbrella. All the tools such as for your work item management, you got boards. For your CI/CD pipeline, you got Azure pipelines. For your repository management, you got Azure repos. For your artifact management, you got Azure artifact. For your test plan management, you got Azure test plan. If anything is missing, there are service connections, service hooks, which you can connect to your Azure DevOps. Now, if you want to do, just imagine if you want to do your work item management, what are the other tools available in the market? We got Confluence, we got Jira. For Azure repos, what are the other tools we have available? We got Bitbucket, GitHub, GitLab, others. Now for your pipeline management, what are the tools we have? Jenkins, Bamboo, GitHub Action. For Azure artifacts, what are the tools we have? JFrog, Nexus. For test plan management, what are the tools we have? We got TestRail, PractiTest. These are the tools what we have in the market. Now, all these tools, now I got somewhere around 10-12 tools right now, which you see on my screen. Now, all this work is done by one single tool, that is Azure DevOps. Now, if you're not using Azure DevOps, just imagine you're not using Azure DevOps, you are using other tools. You need to go and register yourself, get an enterprise license on all these other tools, because you're not using for your personal use, that you don't require enterprise license. You're using for your company, for your corporate purpose, for your production servers. Then you need to go and register yourself, get an enterprise license, manage all those tools individually. It's not getting like you don't have multiple tools in one window. It is getting managed. You need to manage it all separately. Now with Azure DevOps, you have a benefit. Everything you have inside one umbrella. Using one portal, you will have something, a similar portal like this. Using one portal, you have everything inside one portal. That is what Azure, that is the reason why this Azure DevOps tool is getting very famous and it's getting very frequently used nowadays. Now let me show you a Google trend. Now this trend, I got it from Google. This is the last 5 years trend of India. Okay, not world. This is India trend, guys. And in this India trend, if you see the blue line, if you see, this is Azure DevOps for you. And the red line, what you see, this is AWS DevOps. Now, many of you will say why there's no comparison between Azure DevOps and Jenkins. That is the question I get very frequently. The reason is we don't get that. Jenkins is not a complete umbrella, guys. It's understand Jenkins, it is just an integration tool. Jenkins, if you talk about Jenkins is just an integration tool. So there is no apple to apple comparison. If you want to compare Azure DevOps, the only right tool which is there in the market right now, that is AWS DevOps. Okay, so Jenkins is not at all the right tool wherein you can do the comparison. Just keep that in mind. Now followed by, this is a trend. Now if you see from the trend is from year 2018 till date. Now if you see from somewhere over here in the year 2019, there is a spike. of Azure DevOps. Now, why this spike was, there's multiple reasons for this spike. The first reason is in the year 2019, Microsoft has acquired GitHub. Not fully, partially Microsoft has acquired GitHub because Microsoft was using TFS, Team Foundation Version Control. That is centralized version control. I'll talk about distributed and centralized version control during my session. Now, even Microsoft is aware that Microsoft needs to move on to distributed version control. So that's why they have acquired GitHub. And now today, what you see Azure repos, this is nothing but this repos, Azure repos, what you see, this is nothing but this is Microsoft Git. Okay, previously it was using TVFS, that was Team Foundation Version Control. And plus there was a drastic change. This Azure DevOps was previously known as TFS, Team Foundation Server. Now, after the acquisition in the year 2020, there was a drastic change in Azure DevOps GUI. And there were so many things included and it becomes so robust that there's no stopping now. Okay, so these are few examples I'm giving right now why Azure DevOps is so trending nowadays. Okay, it's a quick comparison. Now see guys, the project selection will be depends upon the tool selection will be totally dependent on what type of project you're working, which company you're working, what they are using right now. It totally depends upon them. Okay, it's like you can give the suggestion to your project manager, but at the end he will be the one who will be deciding what needs to be done. But definitely a senior DevOps engineer suggestion is very much required and it is very much accepted. Just keep that in mind. Let's talk about some key components in DevOps. So I'll talk about 3 components. Okay, we got 30 minutes. Okay, so we have time. Then we'll have a quick demo. So these are the 3 components which you will hear a lot. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment. Let's understand what exactly are these. Okay, these are some of the key components. There are many key components of DevOps which we'll not discuss today. These are the 3 which we will talk about today. Now, when I say continuous integration, okay, when I say continuous integration, what do we mean by continuous integration? Now think of a developer. There is a developer who is using some sort of IDE tool. IDE is Interactive Development Toolkit. Like suppose Visual Studio, Eclipse, Visual Studio Code, PyCharm, any other, whatever tool they are using, whatever tool they are comfortable developing with. So they are using, and they have created some sort of modules. Okay, once they have created the modules, they pushed the module into their local Git repository. This is on the local Git repository, they have pushed it. Once the changes are pushed into the local Git repository, from there they merge the change with the remote repository. In my case, I'm using Azure repos for an example for my remote repository. And once the changes are pushed into the remote repository, there is a build pipeline. Now, what exactly is build pipeline? We'll talk about that. The build pipeline has triggered automatically. Now, when we talk about continuous integration, we are just focused on build and test. Release deploy is not part of continuous integration. Okay, what exactly build is happening? So merging the code with remote repos once the code is merged. So during the build process, the actual what exactly happened? Compiling source code. So during the build process, a source code gets compiled, and along with it, you have multiple other things which can be integrated with your build pipeline, such as unit test cases, running unit test cases, running code coverage, integrating static code analysis such as SonarQube. Okay, then if you want to do scanning, vulnerability scanning, you can do that things over there. Once all this task, like your build is done, your integration is done, your testing is done, your code coverage is done, your static code analysis is done. Once all this is done, you will have an artifact created at the end of the day. Once the build is completed, that artifact is nothing but it's an output file. Basically, it's a file which can be later deployed. you can deploy this artifact wherever you want. If it's a Azure VM, Azure Web App, AKS, Kubernetes, container, whatever type of application and whatever you have written, based on that, your artifact will be deployed on the end server. That is what we'll do today. This all forms together. This all step, this complete step, complete flow, which you see right now, it happens continuously. Okay. Now one developer did the development, the other developer did, and this is a continuous loop which is happening. This all is known as continuous integration. You call it as continuous integration, you call it as continuous build. It is the naming convention, whatever you use. Okay. Now this complete workflow is known as continuous integration. Okay. This is something we'll do a very similar task today, because doing the demo, and we'll see how exactly this happens. Okay. And we'll follow this same path. Okay. Now what is continuous delivery? Now you have done the build, you have the build. Now today I'm taking an example of 4 environments, guys. I'm taking an example of dev, QA, that is my lower environment, and stage production will be my upper environment. That is the example which I'm taking. With continuous delivery, what will happen once the build is done, your things will be auto deployed into the lower environment such as dev and QA. And for upper environment, stage and prod, there are approval process in between. What is? There are approval process. Like before the thing gets into stage, you need to have some sort of approval, manual approval. And once it is deployed in stage, you will again have some sort of post deployment approval. Same goes with your prod and your prod environment. Now, why do we need this approval in between? Because you're not sure. And after the QA is done successfully, you want to go back to the QA team, check with them if all the QA testing was done, all the automate testing was done. If there's any issue, at that time, you will wait for the QA to give you a green flag. Post that, you will deploy things in stage manually. Now, this is again not manual, guys. It's just the approval process, which is manual. Things will be done using pipeline itself. Okay. Post deployment. Now, after post deployment, you want to do some sort of post deployment testing, some sort of automation testing, some sort of dynamic testing, some sort of black box testing. Why? So if your team wants to do any such testing after your deployment, at that time you will have such post approval. So this particular delivery model is very much followed nowadays. Okay. Now, wherein you have a monolithic application, wherein you don't have the surety that whatever build test you did, my application will have no issues, even though if it is deployed, at that time you'll have this delivery model. Okay. So continuous delivery is an automated release process. We can deploy our application at any time by clicking a button. This is just a button click over here and things will be deployed. With continuous delivery, you can decide to release daily, weekly, fortnightly, or whatever suits your business requirement. So this method is used with companies with project wherein they have some sort of release cycle, like weekly release, monthly release. And if you have any such sort of weekly cycle, at that time, you will be having such the method. With continuous delivery, codes gets deployed into lower environment without manual interventions. But for upper environment deployment, manual approval is required. Okay, so that is continuous delivery. On the other hand, we got something called as continuous deployment. In continuous deployment, as soon as you're done with your build, your thing gets deployed into the lower environment. And from there, the thing gets deployed into the upper environment without any manual interventions. Now with continuous deployment process, guys, there's no manual interventions. Once your build is successful, the code will be deployed till production. No stopping in between. The only thing your deployment will stop when the build fails. Now, in such case, your build should be very robust. You should have at least 95% of code coverage. Each and every aspect, each and every module, each and every function should be well tested in your application. And you should be very much thorough that once this gets deployed into production, there's no production related issue. If you have such robust application, in such cases, you will definitely use this complete continuous deployment model. With continuous deployment model, there is no release cycle. You take out this complete release cycle concept from deployment. There is no release cycle. The things will be built and the things will be deployed automatically. Okay. That is a bit of DevOps, guys. DevOps is not just small. There are many things, many aspects, many key components, which we'll talk about. We are coming up with a new batch on 27th May. We have a demo, morning 7 a.m. IST Indian Standard Time, and the regular sessions will start on from 29th May. Okay, please reach out to the admin team. They will give you more information about this. Now let's talk about demo. Now let me give you an introduction to the demo. Now this is what my application is, guys. To save time, I've already created this application. Later I'll be showing you how this application is created and things like that. Again, one frequently asked question which I get a lot, whether we require any sort of coding experience. Okay, so for this course, there's no coding experience required, guys. Whatever, I'm not denying that I'll not do scripting. We have a lot of scripting in this course. We got JSON scripting, YAML scripting, Terraform scripting. There are many things, but whatever is there, I'll be covering from very scratch. So if you're not familiar with any coding language, don't worry, we'll take care of those things. So let's quickly do a demo. We have 5 minutes for the demo. Let's go and do it. Now this is my application. Let me give you a quick glance what this application is all about. Okay, let me close this slide for now. Okay, this is what my application is, guys. Let me run this application locally first before. Let me show what this application is. We'll take questions after 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes. Let me quickly get this deployed. Okay, now let me go to the desktop where my application is. What is the name of the folder? CD DevOps. Okay, we are inside the application right now. I'm using PowerShell because it's a .NET application, guys. That's why I'm using PowerShell. Okay, let me go inside the folder. Okay, now in order to run this application, the first thing is we need to publish this application. Okay, so the command is .NET publish. So publish is basically what it will do. It will compile your application locally and it will get you all the dependencies, whichever is required. And at the end, it will create a publish folder from where you can go and run your application locally. So this is what I'm doing. I'm running a .NET application on my local system. So I'll just want to show you what exactly is this. Later, when this gets deployed using your pipeline, at that time, I'll show you what exactly got deployed. Okay, now if you see, there is a publish folder which got created. Now let's go inside this folder. Let me go to CD. Okay, let's go inside this folder. And in order to run this application, just copy this part. .NET, that's the name of your application. That's the name of your application, the DLL. Copy, do a Control C and Shift Insert, run it. Now this should run on my local host. Okay, if you see this, it's listening on local host 5000. Now let me open a browser. Open over here. Okay. This thing is not going up. Your screen. Are you guys able to see my screen? Let me stop sharing and share it again. Okay, let me share it again. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes,
Perfect. So I don't know since when the stop sharing was there. Okay. Did you guys see how did I run the application locally? Application. Okay, let's do it again. Okay, guys. So let me close this window. Okay, so this is my application. This was my application. Now, basically this application, I need to go and deploy this application using my CI/CD pipeline. Now, what we can do, we can have a PowerShell open PowerShell because this is a .NET application. So I'll be using PowerShell. Let's do a CD to desktop because my application folder is kept over there. And let's go inside the application. Okay. So basically, when you want to run this application locally, there is a command which you need to execute. .NET publish. This command, basically what it does, it will be compiling your source code and it will getting you all the required dependency of your application. When you run this command, what will happen? Or .NET publish folder will be created, and you will have all your static and dynamic content of your application in that folder. Now I have already executed this command, so I'll not execute this command again. Let's do it again. Let me do it again. Okay. Once you're there over here, you can, if you see, this is the folder, copy this folder, do a CD to that folder. CD stands for change directory. And once you're there inside this folder, you will see all the DLL files over here. Now, in order to run your application, copy your application name. This is your application name. Run .NET followed by the application name. Now, what will happen? You will have your application running on local host. Okay. So you can open any browser and you can run your application. Okay. This is what your application, welcome to DevOps. This is what your application is all about. Okay. Now, this is something I'm doing it locally. Now, the same thing needs to be deployed using CI/CD pipeline. So if you remember the flow, the continuous integration flow, the first thing is we need a repository, correct? So what I'll do, I have a Azure DevOps account. So this is the account. Just to save time, I have an account created already. And I do have a project created. Now, how this account gets created, how the project gets created, that is something we'll talk about later. Now, for now, let me use this project, the existing project, okay? And let me create a new repository. What I'm creating a new repository. Basically, this is a .NET web app, which I'm deploying. So I just named this repository as .NET web app, okay? Now, what did I do? I've created a new repository. I have nothing inside this repository. I clone it on my local. How do I clone it? So for cloning, I'm using git bash, guys. That's why I said git bash is required. So I'll be using git bash. Okay. So this is basically a bash shell wherein I can go and run my git commands. Okay. Now, if you see this, I'm cloning the repository locally. How I was able to clone? Because I have the credential, user ID, password already saved inside my Windows machine. If you're cloning it for the very first time, it will prompt you for a user ID password. This is the user ID and password. You have to use it. So whichever email ID you are using for login, you need to use the same email ID and password. Okay. Now do a git clone quickly. I've done the git clone already. Do a CD to the repository which we have created. Where exactly we are? We are not in the desktop. Let's go into the desktop and go to net. What is the name of the folder? Where did we created the clone? We created the clone in some other location. somewhere over here. Okay, forget about this. Let's go and create the clone again on the desktop itself. Let's create it over here. Okay, once you clone, you have the folder over here. Let's go inside that folder .NET. And what I'll do, I'll copy my application files and I'll put it in the repository. Why exactly I'm doing it? So that I can push things to my remote repository. Okay. Now, if you go and see Git status, if you're not familiar with Git, don't worry, guys. We'll be having Git sessions as well. So let me do a quick Git add, Git commit, and push things to my remote repository. Initial commit. Okay. Done. Let's do a Git push. Pushing, by pushing, what do I mean? Merging the changes with my remote repository. Where is the remote repository? Right over here. Okay. We got the application. Let's go and quickly create a build and a release pipeline. Now we'll be using the pipeline section over here. Now in Azure, there are two ways you can create pipelines: using classic way, wherein you get a GUI and plugins, and the second way is using YAML, wherein we need to write YAML script. Okay, so today we'll focus on classic. I don't want to make this more complicated for you all. So I'll have a classic pipeline created. If you come down, there's a link over here. Use the classic editor. And this is my application repository. My main branch is selected already. Now we can either go and select empty job, or we can make use of some templates over here. Now this is a .NET application. So this is what template this is the .NET core application, guys, not a legacy one. So this is the task template which you can use it. Okay, so let's go and use this template. Let's give it a nice name, .NET build. Okay, now this two task is not required. I'll talk about these tasks later. For now, this is not required. Let me remove it. The only task is required is NuGet. So NuGet is a package manager for running for building and .NET application, guys. So this is the package manager will require when you're working with .NET application. Same way for Java, Maven, for Node and all, for Angular and all, we have NPM. So same way for NuGet, we got NuGet. Now, what is package manager? How do we work with package manager? All this we'll talk about during the sessions. Okay. Now, if you see during the build, there is one argument which is basically creating a package. So this is argument will be creating a final package for you guys. And at the end, this package will be placed in my drop location. This location is basically on Azure cloud. This is basically a container, temporary container gets created and your artifact gets placed over here. There is a different, you can even keep your artifact in a file share path if you want. For now, we'll stick with this. Save it and queue it. What will happen? Your build has started. This is your build pipeline has started. Your build is running. Now, in order to save time, let's go and create a release pipeline also. Okay. Now for release pipeline, okay, while the build is happening, let's click on release and create a release pipeline. Now I want to deploy this particular application on Azure Web App. Azure Web App is a platform as a service provided by Azure, wherein all the prerequisite dependencies are already taken care. You just need to get your code and you need to get it deployed on Azure Web App. Okay, so that's a platform as a service provided by Microsoft. Okay, now if you go to my cloud, I already have logged into cloud. Now in this cloud, this is app service. Basically, this is what I'm Azure Web App I'm talking about. I have already created an app service. Okay, now if you go and look into this app service, this is basically what we get. This thing is not going up. Forget about it. Let me open one more browser. So when you try to open this URL, this is what you get. You have a running web server, okay, with a default page. Now on this default page, I want to deploy my application. Now, before that, I think by this time, the build might be done, not done. Let me refresh it. Where are we right now exactly in the build? It is still building the solution. It's okay. Let's go back and create a release pipeline. Let's select empty job now. Let's name it as dev environment. Okay. Now, this is where my artifact will be. So I have a build pipeline right now, so I can give that build pipeline as a source. So let me select the build pipeline as a source type. What is the name of my build pipeline? .NET build, latest, and add. If you go inside this, you can add your task. Let's give a good name. Let's name it as .NET release. Okay. Let's add a task over here. So what exactly I need to do? I need to do a deployment, app service deployment. So if you see this task, basically this does the .NET core deployment as well. So let's go over here, select this, select your subscription, how this connection got created. Now, why exactly I'm showing directly the release? There are various other things you need to know, guys. You need to know what is agent pool, what is service connection. You need to have a better understanding of Azure Active Directory. Then only we can come to the release section for a better understanding. For now, just to give you the demo, end-to-end demo, I'm doing the release. I have the connections created beforehand. This is web app on Windows. And if I click on the drop down, I should see my web app service name. This will be only visible when you have the service connection. And for creating a service connection, you need to have a better understanding of service principles. Okay. That is something we'll cover later. Now, at the end of the day, a zip file will be created. Now, if you go and see my build again, at the end of the day, if you see the build again, you have the build completed. Now, this is the section where your drop folder is, and this is your application, guys. This zip file, what you see, this is basically your application. Now, let's go and now, what exactly system default working directory? This is the location where your zip file is kept. And what exactly these are? These star, these are wildcat character. This star is basically used in regular expression. This will go and match and look for a zip file at the end location. Now, no changes done over here. Save it. And let's go and run the first release. Now, this is all we are doing manual right now, creating things manual. Once everything is created, we can have the continuous integration and continuous deployment triggers also. Okay. Now, this deployment will take a couple of minutes, and your local application, which I showed you, that application will be successfully deployed on Azure cloud using Azure CI/CD pipelines. Okay, I know, guys, I've taken more 10 minutes. So let's start with the Q&A while the deployment is happening. There are so many questions. Okay. Okay, can you share? Okay, this is not, can't see application. First question. Okay, guys, we are open to questions. If you have any questions, please do let me know. So there's a question from Ayush. Is there any difference in availability or any tools between Azure DevOps and Azure AWS, or they are same, like if anyone of them has something extra? Okay, so basically the process of doing things will be the same, Ayush. Now, if just let me give an example. If you have a Java application, just imagine you have a Spring Boot application. The process to build and release the Spring Boot application is you need to use Java Maven. Okay, and at the end of the day, you either will be a jar file or a war file will be created. That jar or war file can be deployed wherever you want. So the process of building and releasing will remain same, whether you do it on AWS or Azure, it doesn't matter. Okay, that process will not change. So it is, you should know how things are done. The only thing will differ if the GUI, like Azure DevOps GUI is totally different. If you go on to AWS DevOps, the GUI will be different. If you go to Jenkins, the GUI will be different. Okay. Done. Anyone else, guys? Any questions? It's all about the pause thing. Any questions, guys? what is this? Are there any limitation of DevOps that we should know to better limitation? It's up to like what project you're working, what kind of work has been assigned to you. And at that time, if you can share, if you have faced any such limitation to give you in live, like what limitation it could be like for automation. Let's see, one thing to remember, not everything will be automated. You cannot automate everything. Okay, there will be some sort of limitation, there will be some sort of legacy which you need to follow. If it's a monolithic application, it's not that tomorrow you can think that now this monolithic needs to be converted into microservice. No, you need to see the structure, how the flow is, and the key, on that basis you need to do your analysis. Okay, can we build KPI metrics in Azure? DevOps KPI metrics. Okay, now depending on what kind of metrics you want to build, okay, you can make use of boards and you can define your metrics over there. So there are various ways to do it, or if there is some tools which you're using already, you can easily integrate that tool with Azure. How Kubernetes and Docker managed by Azure? Kubernetes and Docker, this is, if you're talking about Kubernetes, if you're talking about bare metal Kubernetes, wherein you have set up a server and you have set up Kubernetes on top of it, Azure will not manage that. You will be able to connect to that Kubernetes server using various service connection. Okay. Azure will manage its own Kubernetes service, that is AKS, that Azure Kubernetes service. Okay. And Azure has container service also. So Azure has nothing to do with your bare metal Kubernetes or Docker if you're running. But yeah, if you want to connect to those particular machines using Azure DevOps, that is quite possible. Okay, before I answer all this question, let me show you the deployment was successful, guys. And if you go into this URL, you'll be able to see your application. Now I think we have opened this URL, correct? Let's refresh this. Now, if you see, your application was successfully deployed on Azure App Service. Okay, let's go back and answers those questions now again. Now there are so many chat. Can we just wait a minute? I'm reading through it. Make it quick. I cannot answer all this, but let me pick some of it. Can you please show me Java application demo with Maven? We have 4 projects, Srinivas, doing my course. We got Java, Maven, Springboard. We got .NET Core. We got SQL database automation. We got 2-tier application wherein we have Node.js. So in that, at that point of time, I'll be having this Maven session also. So that's a project. Okay, this is again a very interesting question. Can you explain Azure Artifacts and JFrog? Both are repository management tools. Sorry, artifactories. Both are artifactory. JFrog, basically use JFrog a lot with Jenkins, because Jenkins, you don't have something called Azure Artifacts. You need to store your artifacts, your packages somewhere. Okay, so mostly people use Jenkins with JFrog and Nexus, wherein they are storing their packages, that so that they can, from there they can get it deployed onto the end server. In Azure, we have in-house Azure Artifact, which does the exact same thing what Nexus and JFrog does. The same thing you can do with Azure Artifact. So you don't need to be dependent on any third-party tool. Okay, how we are going to take care of DB script on CI/CD? Yes, this is very interesting, Hari. We have SQL database automation project. So we'll be basically having a DAC packages created. Using that DAC packages, we'll have a build pipeline, then we'll have a release, then we'll be deploying our packages on the end server. That is how we'll take care of this DB scripts. Okay. Azure DevOps support Ansible. Yes, it does support. I think I had some pipelines over here in my Azure DevOps, where it is. Okay, to minimize this. Okay, now in this, I think some pipelines over here. You guys might have seen it, Ansible related. Yeah, you can run Ansible playbook, and we do have Ansible covered during the sessions. Let's go and see the chat again. take a session on pipeline development coming days. No, Mayuri, I don't think we'll have any sessions now. We'll directly meet on 27th when we have the demo. Post that, we'll start with our sessions, basically. Live. It's a quite a big uh, course, this Advanced Azure DevOps with security. This is a quite a big course wherein there are multiple security topics like static code analysis, code coverage, Jacoco, unit test cases, Istio, Helm chart, Talisman, pre-hook, post-hook. There are many things we are covering. So we'll not have any sessions in between, I believe. How can we register? So please reach out to the admin of SkillUpRight. They can guide you with the registration process. Okay. Let me see. How does testing take place? Now, Ravi, what type of testing you're talking about? Being a DevOps engineer, you don't need to write the unit test cases, but you should be aware how do you integrate those testing with your pipelines, with your build pipeline. That is something we'll learn. Okay. What else? To quality check standards. Again, Mohan, again, this quality check and everything is not your role. Understand that. What is your role? A DevOps engineer will not go and do quality check of what developer has written. Okay. You can do quality source code analysis. You can integrate SonarQube. SonarQube will do the custom quality check, and those reports will be again shared to the developers. Now, what is your role over here? Your role is how do we integrate such tools with your pipelines? Understand that, okay? Okay, 7 new messages. Could you please share recorded class? Yeah, definitely this recording will be shared, no worries. Share the docs. So you're talking about the PPT, Sarita? Okay, surely I'll reach out to the SkillUpRight admin team and they can help you with. Yeah, so the guidelines and everything, this is part of your course. When we talk about Azure DevOps, each time I'll be talking about the best practices, what the DevOps engineer needs to do, what are the roles and responsibility of a DevOps engineer when you start actually working on the project, what will be your response, what will be your roles and responsibility. That is something we'll discuss. Avoiding question. Avinash, surely I'm not avoiding questions. Okay. Can you put in your questions again? There are so many questions popping up. It's not possible for me to go and read through it. I think I should have one more monitor just to view all the questions. Okay. For iOS deployment, App Store deployment tasks, two-factor auth, how to handle in DevOps. Okay. The iOS deployment, App Store deployment, you're talking about Android and you're talking about mobile software deployment. And two-factor authentication coding. Now, two-factor is basically your login you're talking about. Two-factor login, authentication login, which you're talking about. How to handle in DevOps, there are various other tools, again, for iOS, if you're working with iOS, if you're working with Android development. So there are various other tools which you can use, and you can integrate those tools with Azure DevOps. Okay, if you're talking about DevOps, then yeah, in Azure DevOps, you got those tools as well available, which you can easily go and integrate. Okay, and if you want to achieve CI/CD for your iOS or Android development, even that is possible. Okay, can you explain about Terraform integration? Terraform integration with Azure DevOps are we talking about? So if that is the question, then yes, we can easily integrate Terraform with Azure DevOps. Now, how exactly it is done? That is something we need to go through the course. We need to understand the Terraform workflow. Then we can run that same workflow with CI/CD pipelines, and we can do it. Not just Terraform. How do we integrate Ansible with your CI/CD pipeline? Even that is something you need to understand. Okay. What project do you suggest to do while learning DevOps? Multiple projects you can go. See, you cannot be dependent. You cannot call yourself that I am a DevOps engineer, but I just know .NET CI/CD. Are you a DevOps engineer? So whichever project, whatever hands-on you can do, .NET, Java, Spring Boot, Angular, Python, Go, whichever project you get, try to see how that build happens, how the release happens. Okay, I cannot specific pinpoint, like just imagine. That's why I'm covering 4 projects in my course, guys, just to give you a complete glimpse that once you know all these 4 projects, you will have a fair idea how other things are done in real time. Okay, so I, frankly speaking, cannot pinpoint. It totally depends upon what project you're working in real time, what application you're working, what kind of build and release you're doing. It totally depends upon that. Okay, so I think we are done for the day. I'll hand over to the admin, and if there is something pending, you can let me. It's not possible, frankly, to answer everything, but surely I'll try to answer as soon as possible. How the deployment script got created for the project that we saw while we created? Deployment script got created. We haven't created, Prathamesh, we haven't created any deployment script. The build, if you're talking about, this build was created using Classic. Even the release what we have created, that was using Classic. So there is no script as such created. It just, we have the application pre-created. And then when we build it, the application created a zip file. That's it. Any import from Bamboo, YAML to Azure DevOps? Yes, definitely. Suppose you want to do your continuous integration in Bamboo, like your company is already using Bamboo, for example. Now, but the deployment part you want to take care at the Azure side. There is a way out. You can integrate Bamboo with Azure DevOps. So if anything is missing on Azure DevOps, there is a possible way you can go and integrate those tools with Azure DevOps. Okay. Okay, let me answer some of them. Tejashwani, can web application with SSL certificate for login impact create issue while running automation pipeline? ECS. Web application with SSL certificate for login impact create. I'm not sure what exactly this question is, but even though if you have SSL certificate integrated with your web servers, okay, there is no issue with your CI/CD pipeline. Tejashwani, there's no impact that your CI/CD pipeline will have if you have any SSL certificate or anything as such. Okay. How to migrate from Bamboo to Azure pipelines? Okay, this migration, again, it's a complete flow process. You need to have a service hook created. Now, migration, what type of migration are you? Do you want to migrate your complete build and release from Bamboo to Azure DevOps? So the first thing, you need to migrate your repository, where your repository is. Then whatever task, what task you're running, that task you need to create in Azure DevOps. You need to create the build. You need to have your end server created. You need to have your release created. So it's just not that you will be picking things up and putting it on Azure DevOps. So it's a migration is a big process. You need to take care of each and everything when you're migrating. Okay, guys, that's it for me. Yeah, I know you guys still have the questions. Put in your questions and send me emails, and I'll try my best to answer all your questions. Okay, and I'll hand over this back to SkillUpRight.
Yes,
Thank you very much, guys.
Rohit, thanks for your time. Thank you all for joining this session. It was a wonderful session. Unfortunately, we just have 1 hour, so maybe we'll continue with the next session, and we can have more discussion. Thanks all. Thanks for your time, and Rohit, thanks a lot for spending additional 10-12 minutes.
No problem, because we have already delayed the things because not sharing. So I wanted to spare some time. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining, and hope to see you all back. Goodbye. Bye.
Yeah, bye, Rohit. From your end, you can end the session because you have the admin access.
Yeah, I'll do it.